This is literally this is literally the third time I tried to do this. I don't know why this time I had a lot of trouble. First time I tried recording, I discovered later that the video has no audio. Second time I did this, I think no audio would have been better. So this is the third time. If third time is not the charm, then I'm gonna give up. This time I'm gonna try to use this. I got this a while back, the Rode mics. Supposedly they're good, but they are notoriously difficult to work. I think I managed for now. I don't know if there's a better way to get a better audio quality. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure things out, but fingers crossed. I have to keep checking. I have to keep checking if it's working. And because I'm not used to it, I'm sorry if the P's are gonna sound like... I don't want this to happen, so I still don't know the right distance from my face, but it's okay. Today, I thought I would talk about the last book that I read, which was a very random choice. And then I thought I would update you on the 2 other books that I'm reading simultaneously. Now, I'm gonna tell you why the book that I read is a very random pick. First of all, I think it's more of a wintry read. I don't feel like it's a summery book, but there was a reason why I chose to read it. It's Game of Thrones, or the book is actually a Game of Thrones. So I read the first book in the series. I think it's a series of, I don't know if it's 5, 6, or 7 books, I always forget. I read the first one in the series, and I'm gonna tell you why. The show Game of Thrones was released in 2011. I was still in high school, and everyone was talking about it back then. There was a lot of hype around it. But the thing about me is that I tend to steer clear from the things that have a lot of hype around them. And I tend to go back to them when the hype dies. This is why I watched a show like Stranger Things relatively later than other people. And Game of Thrones as well. So a lot of friends, including my sister, have been begging me to watch it for years now. Literally for years. I kept saying, no, I don't know, I'm not in the mood, I don't think I'm gonna like it. Boy, was I wrong. I think I watched it a couple of months ago now. I was hooked from the first episode. I was addicted to it. Now, while my friends were laughing at me saying, ha ha ha, you're so late to the game, I laughed back and said, well, at least I have the luxury to binge watch them, which I did. But I also had one friend who recommended the books, which I was surprised about because she was literally the only one in my life who had read them. She sent me a message saying, I really think you should read the books because they are even more interesting than the show. I thought I would give it a try. I haven't read a big series in a very long time, especially a fantasy series. Last time I read a series like that was, I think it was Harry Potter. That was a while back, and I haven't even finished The Lord of the Rings. I hope I will at some point. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk very briefly about my experience reading Game of Thrones, the first book. And bleeding into this video will be a lot of reference to the show because I'm gonna compare some stuff or mention some scenes that I loved, you know, compare the book to the show. And then I will tell you about the other books that I'm reading. Sorry, I'm checking my audio because... okay, I think it's working. So first things first, I just want to say that one time I watched a YouTube video and it was a conversation between Stephen King and George R.R. Martin, who's the writer of Game of Thrones. Actually, the franchise is entitled A Song of Ice and Fire. Game of Thrones is just part of this larger franchise. So it was a conversation between him and George R.R. Martin. And I remember thinking, I wonder if I will ever watch the show, let alone read the books. But now here I am. To be honest, reading the series is a commitment, to say the least. It's a very lengthy series and each book is so thick. I also remember watching a video that's recently, after having watched the series. Some of the actors from Game of Thrones were sitting, they had like a panel, and the writer was sitting with them. They asked them if they have read the books in preparation for their roles or throughout the shooting. And it was such an awkward moment, and half of them had to say, unfortunately, I have not read them. As far as I know, only Kit Harington and Sean Bean read them. Kit Harington read them religiously. He was so in love with his role, I think, and yeah, it was very important to him. I think he wanted to do the full research and all that. It's funny that Sean Bean read the books. Maybe he read the first one, but it's also funny because he has, I think, the least amount of screen time out of all of them. Sophie Turner said that she only read the parts related to her character Sansa, and Maisie Williams had her mom and stepdad read it for her. They kept updating her on the story and her character Arya. Now, before I start, I just want to also say something that I realized recently. I was thinking about the type of people that I envy. I'm seriously jealous of people who are able to read under any circumstances. This is something that I was never able to do. Maybe I haven't tried hard enough, but I feel like you're either a bookworm or you are someone who has to put a lot of effort to concentrate on the task of reading. I love books. I really love reading books. It's just that my mind is a very loud place, if I were to put it very simply. And it breaks my heart that whenever I'm going through like hard times, this is when I feel like I find it the most difficult to read. Maybe that's normal because again, you're worried, your mind is thinking about many things. But then again, they say that reading is supposed to help you escape. Reading is a source of comfort. But I never could do that. I could never just shut my brain and binge read. If that's a word, I don't know if you can say binge read. I think it's something that I have been trying to do, especially recently. I refuse to stop reading just because I'm worried or just because my brain is thinking about a bunch of things. Because what would be better? Scrolling through social media or just, getting lost in a book literally. The latter is way better. Why would I find it more comforting to just, doom scroll on Instagram? I don't even think it's that comforting. Like sometimes social media gives me even more anxiety for some reason, and sometimes it just annoys me. I love the expression brain rot because it is true about social media. I'm not generalizing. I'm saying in many ways it can be brain rot. So this is why I am, especially now, trying to put a lot of effort into sticking to my reading list and just reading. Even if it's 2 to 3 pages per day, it's okay. It's better than nothing. I made a deal with myself to keep a book around me at all times. On my desk, on my bedside table, in my bag, in my purse, just everywhere. And whenever I have free time, I'll just read a few pages. So I think I'm proud of myself because so far so good. I mean, I am going through a relatively tough time, but I was able to go through a very big book and I enjoyed it. I remember after a long day, I would be excited about coming to bed and just go to Westeros, which is the world from A Game of Thrones. It felt good. It was escapism. Even though sometimes I found it hard to concentrate and I had to read the same sentence over and over again, especially because there's a lot of names, there's a lot of... It's a very detailed book and you have to concentrate. But I managed. Now here's the book that I finished. Whenever I read a very large book, it always ends up looking sad because they live with me for a very long time. I'll be honest with you, this one has been through seawater, sand, tub water. I read in the tub a lot, which is really dangerous for your books. I have friends who freak out whenever they see the state of some of my books because I have friends who can't even crack the spine. And I use them and abuse them, but lovingly. Look, it's falling apart, so my sister tried to attach it for me. The book also traveled with me, but it was a good read, so I gave it a lot of love. Now, I was thinking about this video. I don't think this video will be helpful to anyone. I mean, if you are very familiar with Game of Thrones, if you've read the books and watched the show, then you will not learn anything new. And if you don't know anything about Game of Thrones, then you will not learn anything because you will be more confused. So this video is just me talking about the just very random things that stuck with me from this read. So let's get started. One of my favorite things about this book is that it is split into the different POVs of different characters. It's not like there's different chapters and each chapter has a title that reflects the content. No. You have on top of each chapter the name of the character whose POV you're following. First time I experienced this format was through Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's split into journal entries of the different characters. And I find this very interesting. I really love this format. And just like in the show, you jump from Daenerys to Eddard Stark to Arya, it's the same thing here. So it makes it very easy to follow the story and follow the different characters. It's also important to note that not all the main characters in the show have their own chapters, at least not in this one. Maybe in the second book you will have Cersei, you will have Jaime, I don't know. I haven't done the research and I haven't read the second one yet. But in this one, I'll just tell you that you have the POV of Eddard, his 2 daughters Arya and Sansa, his son Jon, his wife Catelyn, Tyrion from the Lannister family, and Daenerys Targaryen. Now, the second thing that I really liked is that the content of the book is extremely similar to the show. I was worried that they might have taken a lot of creative liberties, but no. They follow everything point by point. The book even opens the same way. They followed every single thing. And to be honest, the book is so well written, it's so descriptive and cinematic that I don't think that the creators of the show had to put a lot of effort. Everything is there for them. Now, whenever I read a book that has been made into a show or a film or movie, I wonder if it would have been better to read the book first, or if it's good that I watched the movie/show first. To be honest, I think there's no right answer. I don't know. The reason why I wish I would have read the books first is because, the element of surprise is not there anymore. You know what's gonna happen. There's no more suspense. You know everything. The good thing is that everything is set in stone in my head. The visuals, the characters, their faces. I was even hearing the actors' voices in my head as I was reading. But at the same time, I wonder if it would have been more magical to imagine everything to myself, to imagine the faces, to imagine the characters, the settings, the details. I don't know. However, it was also challenging, and I'm gonna tell you why. I don't know if you know this, but the characters in the novel are younger than they are in the show, way younger. The most surprising example would be Daenerys Targaryen. She's actually 14. She's actually 14 when she meets Drogo, when they marry her off to Drogo, when she gets pregnant. Robb and his half-brother Jon, they're the same age, they're 15. Arya is younger, of course. Bran is younger. Even Eddard Stark, Sean Bean, he's not younger than 50, I think, in the show. And yet, in the book, he's in his late 30s. This is why it was a bit challenging to imagine the characters from the show knowing that they are way younger. But it was okay. I got used to it. Of course, I had to do some research to understand why the characters are so young. It's very hard to stomach when there's a lot of graphic scenes and they're just underage characters. The very simple explanation to that is Westeros, which is the world that this story takes place in, has a different idea of adulthood from the modern world we live in. You need to understand that George R.R. Martin is very passionate about history. He actually minored in history. He loves history, specifically the Middle Ages, medieval times. This book, it's true that it's fantasy, but it's what we also call historic fantasy. So it's in many ways accurate to history. When you talk about the Middle Ages, early marriages were normal back then. People could become politically responsible at a young age. You can have like a king who's 10. Life expectancy was also lower. It doesn't mean that people died in their 30s, no, but childhood mortality was high. So this is why people went into adulthood earlier than they do now, of course. It's so clear how much the author loves history and the Middle Ages. I also learned that a lot of historical events have inspired him to write the story. And I'm gonna give you 2 examples today. First of all, let me tell you about George R.R. Martin's view on medieval times. I really love the way he describes it. Martin has a very nuanced view of the Middle Ages. He clearly loves medieval history, but he doesn't romanticize it, and that's very obvious in the story. His general attitude is essentially the Middle Ages were fascinating, but they were also brutal, unequal, dirty, and dangerous. I think that's a very accurate and concise description. Martin has said that he became fascinated with medieval history at a young age, particularly the War of the Roses, which strongly influenced A Song of Ice and Fire. So the Wars of the Roses were a series of civil wars in England from 1455 to 1487, fought mainly between 2 rival branches of the royal house of Plantagenet. You had 2 sides, House of Lancaster, represented by a red rose, and you have House of York, represented by a white rose. Both claimed the English throne. It's like the war to claim the Iron Throne. King Henry VI, a Lancastrian, was a weak ruler who suffered from periods of mental illness. England was also struggling after the costly 100 Years' War with France. You have Richard, Duke of York, believed he had a stronger claim to the throne and gathered supporters. This eventually turned into an open warfare. That's very briefly about the Wars of the Roses. I will later tell you about another historic event that inspired one specific scene that, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, that you definitely remember, because it was very haunting and very memorable and very painful. Another thing that I wanted to mention is how perfect I thought the actors' performances were. I'm gonna give you two examples. Let's say Eddard Stark. If you remember at the beginning of the story, where King Robert asks him, his good old friend King Robert, he asks him to be his hand, the hand of the king. And he was very reluctant. He's been through a lot of things, a lot of wars. He just wanted to grow old in the north, stay in Winterfell, live the rest of his life with his beloved wife Catelyn. But then they succeeded in dragging him to King's Landing. He became the hand of the king. He hated his time there. He was so sad. If you remember him in the show, he was so sad all the time. He was so uncomfortable and nervous. He didn't have anyone around him who he could trust. It was just a very uncomfortable period, and you felt sorry for him. I felt so sorry for Eddard Stark throughout his short time in King's Landing. So I think Sean Bean's performance was so accurate to that. Another example would be the actress Lena Headey, or Headey. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name properly. The actress who played Cersei. Oh my god, she was amazing. And believe me when I say her performance was so accurate. It's in the details. If you remember her in the show, she has this tendency to say the most horrific things and the meanest things while smiling. She also says the most horrific things with a very soft voice. And that's in the book as well. She was very faithful to her character the way it was written. They talk about her smile as she speaks the cruelest things. They describe her voice as silky. When I remember, I fell in love with her voice. But oh my god, what a dangerous character. Another example would be, if you remember Varys, they call him the Spider. He's always wearing robes like a kimono. He always looks very polished. You feel like you can smell him, and they always describe his smell in the book. He smells like lavender and oils, and I love how they describe his slippers. You always hear his slippers on the floor. And of course he was bald and with a round powdered face. It felt so good to read things, compare them to the show, and see how accurate they were. Another thing that I really enjoyed while reading the book is how descriptive it is. And I loved having access to information that I didn't have access to in the show. I mean, this is a gift that the books give you at the end of the day. If you watch an adaptation of a certain novel, going back to the book, it gives you a lot of extras. I loved learning about how Winterfell in the north is actually, the castle is built on natural hot springs, and so they describe the walls of the castle as being warm all the time. That I love this detail. Reading about Godswood, where you have the heart tree, the tree with the red leaves. It's a place where the characters, specifically Eddard and his son Bran, they loved going back there to pray, to meditate. It's a place where they find inner peace. It's where they pray to the gods. I loved every part where the character is in Godswood. I don't know, I even felt inner peace when someone was there. I loved reading about their clothes, the details on the clothes. There's a specific scene that stuck with me for some reason. Sansa had received a dress from Queen Cersei. It was this silky, very delicate dress, and Arya had splattered food on it, and they got into a fight while they were having their breakfast. Sansa was very sad about her dress. She dyed it in black, and she wore it when they were still mourning King Robert after he died. This is the kind of things that you don't have access to in the show, and there's beauty in detail. I don't know. Let's see what else. I mean, I've said this before, but I always enjoy food descriptions. I think in the episode about Haruki Murakami, I talked about this. Is that reading about food or a character preparing food or eating is something that I really find comforting. And in this book, there's a lot of delicious food descriptions, especially when the characters have been looking for food for a while, or they're tired and hungry after a battle, where they describe the meat and how greasy it is while they're roasting it on a fire, the soups, eggs, the wine. It just feels so delicious. You feel like you want to eat. Like, reading those passages will make you hungry. Another detail would be reading about the siblings and how different they are. I mean, I always enjoyed the contrast between them, especially, let's say, the sisters, Arya and Sansa. They couldn't be more different, but reading about it was even more exciting. Sansa, she's such a girly girl. She enjoys being a girl. I don't want to say naive. I hate using this word very lightly, but she kind of is. You know, a lot of things were happening around her, but she kept thinking about her dream to marry a prince. Little did she know that the prince that she was about to marry was actually a monster. She's always thinking about the fairy tale books she would read as a kid, or books that her nan would read to her. There's a lot of references to the fairy tales that she loved so much. In contrast to that, Arya couldn't care less. She couldn't care less about her looks. She wanted to be literally one of the boys. She wanted to learn how to fight. She wanted adventures all the time. She wanted to learn how to sword fight. They were very, very different. The boys as well. You have Jon, you have Robb, Bran, Rickon. They're all so different. Furthermore, I really loved learning about the direwolves and how different they also are, but similar to their human. As you know, the Starks, they found a litter of direwolf pups and they each adopted one. And each direwolf is very similar to their human pet, as I like to say. I was in love with the wolves in the show. I mean, I love animals, but watching the direwolves on screen and reading about them, I could literally cry thinking about it. Now, as you know, out of the siblings, Jon is what they call a bastard because he's Ned's illegitimate child. But we later discover his real parents. But, you know, as far as we know in this book, he is Eddard Stark's half-son. This is why they call him a bastard, and his last name is Snow. They give the last name Snow to illegitimate children. You know how Jon always felt like an outsider in the family? He didn't really feel like he belonged, even though, of course, he loved his family so much. But he always felt like there's a gap, especially because, you know, Catelyn didn't really make him feel welcome, and it's something that really upsets me. She loved him, but she never admitted to it. Just like Jon, his direwolf Ghost was also very different amongst his siblings. He was white, he had red eyes. Jon loved him so much and he loved Jon. They were so protective of each other and I adore that. Of course, Lady is very similar to Sansa. Nymeria is very similar to Arya. Robb had Grey Wind. Bran took a long time to decide on a name for his wolf, but then he settled for Summer. And Rickon had Shaggy Dog. Rickon is the youngest in the family, and Shaggy Dog is described as the most chaotic and most dangerous, just like Rickon, because Rickon was so chaotic as a kid. So yeah, those details made me feel very emotional. What makes me even more emotional is Nymeria's storyline. If you remember in the show, in the first season, Nymeria was once trying to defend Arya, and so she attacked King Robert's son, Prince Joffrey, who was a monster. So Arya begged her to run away because if she didn't, they would have, of course, killed her. She literally kicked her. She begged her to run away. This is how they got separated in the woods. But then there's the scene that I will never forget. It was in season 7, episode 2. Arya had grown up and she's been through a lot. She was camping in the woods and we see her run into this huge, beautiful direwolf. But we were not sure. I think it was Nymeria, but the scene was a bit ambiguous where she runs into her and she growls a bit at her, but then they stare at each other. They maintain eye contact. Then the wolf leaves. Arya looks at her leaving and says, it wasn't you. So I don't know if, I think it was Nymeria, but maybe she's still holding a grudge, maybe she's still sad, maybe she didn't recognize Arya immediately, I don't know, but this scene made me so emotional, and I'm hoping that I will learn more about what happened to Nymeria, because this story makes me so sad. By the way, I forgot to say that in terms of the contrast between Arya and Sansa, something that upset me in the show, but it upset me even more in the book, is that Sansa really didn't care much about Arya. Even she admits it to herself in the novel. She said that, oh my god, I forgot to ask about Arya. Like, she forgets about her. As the older sister, she should worry about her more, but she was so focused on her own personal life that even in the worst situations, in the most dangerous situations, she would forget to ask about her sister, if she's still alive, if they managed to find her. Yeah, I mean, this is a struggle that I had with Sansa in the show for a very long time before she matured. I remember I used to describe her as passive a lot. She was passive to all the horrific things that were happening around her, which was very understandable because she was going through hell. But I was rooting for her to become less passive the whole time. I mean, I fell in love with her towards the end, but trust me, it's a struggle to understand Sansa at the beginning of her story. What else stuck with me? Again, it's something that I noticed in the show and something that that was very dear to me. Arya's love for Jon Snow. She has a weakness for Jon. We notice it in the show, but we also really see that in the book. She really made him feel loved, and she admired him. Yeah, Arya always had a soft spot for her half-brother Jon. And don't forget, he was the one who made her first sword that she called needle, because as a girl she was forced, to learn how to knit and sew and all that. There's this iconic moment where she said, Sansa can stick to her needles, I have my own, because she had this very adorable, very fine sword that Jon made for her before they got separated for a very long time. Another thing, I love that in the book we have access to the characters' feelings and thoughts more, obviously. I mean, whatever we have on screen is accurate, but then again, if you think about it, it's what the directors choose to put on screen, and it's, at the end of the day, the interpretation of the actors. In the book, you have full access to their feelings and their thoughts. An example, when Eddard was gone and he was in King's Landing, and then you know what happened to him. Robb had to take over, and he was only 15. Everything was so overwhelming to him. He had never fought in a battle, he didn't know anything about war, so he had to grow up so fast. Now, if you remember in the show, we see Robb, he's so confident, he always has this look on his face. He looks very confident, very brave, very sure of himself. But if you read the book, you will discover that below this very confident exterior, he was very nervous, scared at times. What I love in those moments is that he had his mom to encourage him. These moments where they are sitting around a map and she's helping him brainstorm. She would encourage him to think out loud. She tells him, I know that this is difficult, I know that you're feeling nervous because you have to command your people, but they are waiting for you, so you have to be sure. Everything you tell them, you have to be sure about. So talk to me, think out loud. His mom, she was like a rock, and I love that about Catelyn. She was so strong and she was willing to be there for her kids however she can. So yeah, that was interesting in terms of having access to characters' real emotions. Even Bran, as you know, Bran becomes crippled at the beginning of the story, and that was very difficult for him. Bran is known for being a very active kid. He loves adventures, he loved climbing. That was his passion. He loved climbing walls, trees, everything. But that ended, and because of a very messed up incident. He also had this dream to become a knight. That dream was shut down as well. He had a lot to deal with emotionally. Trauma, sadness, anger. I remember in the novel there was these moments where he would hear people talking about him, thinking that he cannot hear them. You had people say, oh, poor kid, he's crippled now, he's a broken man. If I were him, I would have ended my life because I'd rather be dead than crippled. Oh, but maybe he's just a coward, this is why he won't end his life. That's so sad, that's horrific. Imagine having to deal with people saying these horrific things about you while having to deal with your own sadness and anger. He also had to overcome his insecurity of being carried around everywhere like a baby. Yeah, that was very memorable. Now, in terms of characters that I really loved reading about, Sam Tarly is one of my favorite characters in the show. I love Sam so much. He's a baby. He's such a good friend to have. I loved his friendship with Jon. I love their friendship, and I would also call it a bromance. I love a good bromance. I loved his soft heart, his kindness. We get to learn more about him as well. Of course, we know that he loves reading. We know this from the show, but he also loves dancing. He loves music, and he loves animals. They say that he's really good with animals. And so this is why Ghost took to him very quickly. He's as protective over Sam as he is over Jon. And I really love that. His interpretation was also very accurate, the actor. The stammering is so accurate, rocking back and forth from nervousness when he's addressing someone that he's nervous to talk to. Another favorite character of mine is Clegane. If you remember in the show, they mostly refer to him as the Hound, and Prince Joffrey calls him Dog. Prince Joffrey is a monster. That's what I'm gonna say. So I loved reading about Clegane. I remember while watching the show thinking that, oh my god, this is gonna be another horrific character that I'm just gonna be nervous about the whole time and that I'm gonna hate with all my heart. But it's one of those beautiful characters who prove you wrong. I mean, I'm one of those people who think that Clegane is one of the best characters. Clegane and Arya were a beautiful duo, besides of course Jaime and Brienne of Tarth. In the book, as rough as he seems, there are these hints that tell you that this is a person with a good heart. The way he would never hurt Sansa, the way he would never hurt Arya, and he's always trying to give them good advice. And one of the scenes that stuck with me in the show is He was burying a bunch of people who had died unfairly. They were slaughtered in a village. He was burying them and he was about to say a prayer, as they always do. But then he stopped mid-sentence, realizing that he doesn't remember he doesn't remember the prayer. He doesn't know what to say. And so he stopped and simply said, "I'm sorry you had to die this way. You deserved better." I love him. He's such a raw character. And the reason why I love his character is because I have a thing for people who have nothing to lose. He's a character who's living his life, showing you that he doesn't need anyone, he doesn't need anything. He cares very little to not at all about his own life. I don't know, I have a soft spot for these people and they inspire me. I don't know, as intense as that may sound, but I just love people who live like this. And as you remember, the Hound Clegane is someone who's been through a lot in his life. I mean, he has this very horrible brother. He has trauma, phobia from fire because of the thing that he had to go through as a kid. His older brother caught him playing with his toys, and so he shoved his face in an open fire. So he had, phobia from the fire ever since then, and his face is half burnt off. Yeah, he's a very precious character. Reading about Arya's hardships, I mean, she's gonna go through a lot, but in the book her hardships start because, as you know, after her father is beheaded, she runs away from King's Landing. She's on her own. Of course, there's more details in the book and they're so heartbreaking. For example, she goes through days of just eating raw pigeon sometimes. She didn't have any belongings. She kept sleeping on top of her sword every night because she was scared of thieves. She didn't want to lose her sword. She was trying to make friends with the hope that someone would offer her a roof to sleep under. Another memorable moment, let's see. Oh yeah, I just remembered. Reading about Lord Commander Mormont, who is the commander at the Wall, when he gifts Jon with his first sword. It was actually the sword that was meant to be given to his own son. We later on learn about his son, that he was exiled for something that he did. That's the story for another time. He replaces the pommel of the sword, he replaces the bear with a wolf, representing Ghost, and of course representing House Stark. Their sigil is a wolf. But I think it was mostly for Ghost, because Jon, along with Ghost, had saved Mormont's life at some point. So it was an homage to Ghost. And I love this scene because, as you know, Jon Snow is not a very expressive character. He's very internal. I think he mostly expresses himself in front of his direwolf. So when he got the gift and he went back to his room, he looked at Ghost and he told him, "Look, it's you." He showed him the pommel. In this moment, I thought to myself that as difficult as Jon's life is, as difficult as the circumstances that he's living in are at the Wall, this moment reminded me that he's just a 15-year-old, and that was so sweet. What else? Oh yeah, now this is a very random detail that I want to talk about. But it's literally one of my favorite things that I read about in the book. Okay, hear me out. I think it stems from my love for anything related to clothes and details. I remember while watching the show, oh my god, this is gonna be so random. I remember while watching the show, I fell in love with those heavy chains that looked like necklaces that the maesters wear around their necks. Now let me tell you who the maesters are in Game of Thrones, just to remind you. In Game of Thrones, the maesters are an order of scholars, healers, scientists, and advisors who train at the Citadel in Old Town. There are different maesters throughout Game of Thrones, if you remember. Maester at the Wall, we later discovered that he's a very important character here because he's a Targaryen. In Winterfell, we have Maester Luwin, and there's also a Maester in King's Landing, of course. So, there are healers, advisors, and they take care of stuff. And they are very intellectual people. By the way, Sam, if you remember, he becomes a Maester, which was very fitting. So I remember the Maesters, they wear robes, but they also have these very heavy chains around their necks. I was very curious about them. I wondered what they mean, because if you look at them, they look so cool, but at the same time they look so heavy, so painful to wear around. If you watch closely, every ring of this chain is different. They look handmade. I was so lucky to learn more about these chains in the book, thankfully. I'm gonna tell you in what context I learned about the chains. It was a scene between Jon Snow and Maester Aemon, who's the Maester at the Wall. He's a very nice person. He was old and he had become blind. And so Jon went to him, asking him to do something about Sam, because Sam was terrified most of the time after his arrival at the Wall. He felt like he didn't fit. They were bullying him. To say it very briefly, they were bullying him. He was not made to wield a sword. He didn't like to fight. He couldn't fight. He couldn't train with them. He didn't want to. It wasn't him. He was an intellectual person. He was scared of most of the things. And so John was begging Maester Aemon if he can tell Lord Commander to put Sam in a category that fit him, to stop torturing him, to stop forcing him to train and fight with the others who were very brutal with him. He told him, please, he can be your steward. He can read all your letters. He can write all your letters for you. He can read every book you have in here, learn more, become a healer. You can make use of him, literally. To make a point, he used the Maester's collar as an example. I'm gonna tell you how. I took this passage because I wanted to read it as it is. John was telling Maester Aemon that, I remember once I asked Maester Luwin. Maester Luwin was the Maester in Winterfell. John asked Maester Luwin why he wore a chain around his throat. Maester Luwin told me that a Maester's collar is made of chain to remind him that he is sworn to serve. I asked why each link was a different metal, and because he was a kid, he proposed to Luwin saying that, why don't you wear like a silver one? It would look much finer with your grey robes. So he was literally styling Maester Luwin. And so he explained to John that a Maester forges his chain with study. The different metals are each a different kind of learning. Gold for study of money and accounts, silver for healing, iron is for warcraft. Maester Aemon says, and so, where are you getting with this? John told him that a chain needs all sorts of metals and a land needs all sorts of people. Furthermore, he said, the Night's Watch needs all sorts too. And so what John was trying to say is that don't make Sam feel useless. Don't make him feel like he doesn't belong. It's just that he belongs in another category and we need everyone here. I love learning about the chains. I love the idea behind it, how it's supposed to remind them of servitude. I remember I found a visual on Pinterest that breaks down each metal and what it means. Silver is medicine and healing, iron is warcraft and military tactics, yellow gold, money, math, economics, black iron, ravenry and animal messaging, bronze is astronomy, copper is history, lead, poison and the study of counter substances, pale steel is smithing, Valyrian steel is quote-unquote the higher mysteries or magic. It also made me wanna make my own necklace. I don't know if that's gonna be possible, but it's just so beautiful. I hope I have a good clear image. I think I might have inserted at this point if I found a good image. It's such a beautiful design and concept. What else do I want to say about the story? Yeah, finally, this is a very important point. I also discovered something recently. I think it's something that I've always known about myself. It's just that I didn't know how to word it. I realized that some of my favorite stories have something in common. I have a very deep love for the theme of found families. To define it very briefly, it's when people who are not blood related come into each other's lives and become closer and more dear to each other than if they were blood family. I have a thing for this theme. It gets me every time. To give you an example, my favorite show, I think so far, I can say with confidence that my favorite show is The Bear. And The Bear is all about found family. If you know, you know. It's something that we find in Game of Thrones. For example, let's take Jon Snow. Jon Snow who never felt like he belonged. When he went to the Wall, he met people, and he met people throughout his journey who became very dear to him. And I can say that they became like family. You have Sam, you have Pip, you have all the friends that he made on the Wall, and even friends out of the wildlings, and it was inconceivable. There's this whole thing about everyone being against the wildlings in the show, but Jon met people who he loved very dearly, and they were wild. I mean, he even fell in love with a wildling girl, so that's for later. I really love when characters come together and this very genuine and unconditional love blooms between them. I think I managed to remember everything that I wanted to say about what stuck with me. By the way, oh my god, the amount of names that you have to keep up with is insane. They're not all very important. Some of them you only run into them in the book maybe once or twice, but think about the brain power that you need to have to create a story with such details, where you have to name, and they're all very like weird names too. They're unusual names. I haven't counted them, but I tried to write down every name that I picked up from the book. I had AI organize them in alphabetical order for me. I think I'm gonna insert them here if you want to check how many names. So 3, 2, 1, here you go. Yeah. That was an interesting thing to do, because I remember even watching the show, I made this whole chart because I thought it would be so difficult to keep up. So I wonder how many names I would pick up if I were to finish the series. Of course, I want to finish the series, but I will pick up the second book maybe sometime around Christmas. I feel like it's a Christmassy book. I don't know. I want to feel cozy. I want to try to read them during the winter this time. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah. Yeah, good thing I took a note. Another thing that I really enjoyed in the Game of Thrones series is this whole idea of good versus evil. If you notice, for example, you have people on the wall who are supposed to be people who are outcasts. They are, some of them go there, they're criminals, they're thieves, they're rapists, or as they say, rapers in the book. You know, but they are guardians at the wall. They serve for a good cause. Of course, there are good people there too. You have Jon Snow, you have Sam. But if you notice, they wear black and black only. And they refer to them as ravens or crows. If you were to take a vow to be part of the Night's Watch, they say you take the black. In the story, they are the good people. And yet, everything related to them is black related. Now you have the King's Guard, who are horrible people. They are always dressed in white and gold. Always talk about them as being very attractive, very suave, very gorgeous. See the contrast? And yet they are bad people. So Martin has explicitly said that this was a deliberate choice. He wanted to undermine the familiar fantasy shorthand that black equals evil and that white or light equals good. In a 2014 interview with The Guardian, Martin explained that much fantasy after Tolkien. By the way, he's a big fan of Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings. I mean, this series is the OG when it comes to fantasy writing. Much fantasy after Tolkien tends to present the story as a straightforward fight between good and evil, with evil characters wearing black or otherwise looking evil. He said he wanted to, quote-unquote, stand some of those things on their heads. In other words, he wanted to challenge this idea. And so his essential good characters, or the Night's Watch, he put them in black, and the King's Guard, he put them in white. Another thing, even more fascinating than this idea of white and black, good and evil, there's this idea of the gray, which is nothing is 100% good, nothing is 100% bad. And if you think about it, we do experience that a lot in Game of Thrones. How many times have we met characters from the beginning of the show where we hated their guts and then we end up weeping for them? I mean, at least for me. I remember hating, let's say, Theon Greyjoy, but then I wept for him in the end. I love his redemption arc. Jaime Lannister, I thought I wanted to finish him myself, and then I fell in love with him and I wept for him. Another example would be the Red Lady, the Red Woman, I think, Melisandre. I don't know how to pronounce her name right. Melisandre. I hated her. And then I felt so emotional for her towards the end. If you think about it, all those people I wept for, they did horrible, unforgivable things at the beginning. And so I think that George R.R. Martin is so good at that, showing you that nothing is good or evil, that there's two, yin-yang. I love yin-yang. I've always loved this philosophy. Yeah, I think he writes about that so perfectly. Okay, I just remembered that I wanted to tell you about another iconic moment in the show. I'm gonna tell you how it was inspired by a real historic event. If you're a fan of the show, of course you remember the Red Wedding. It was a horrific moment. It was a bloodbath. It was beyond sad. It was actually inspired by something called the Black Dinner. The Black Dinner of 1440, my god, that was a lifetime ago, was a notorious episode in medieval Scottish history, and George R.R. Martin said that Scottish history is very bloody. It's one of the major historical inspirations for the Red Wedding in A Song of Ice and Fire. What happened? In November 1440, Scotland was being governed by rival nobles because King James II was only 10 years old. One of the most powerful families in Scotland was the Douglas family, particularly the so-called Black Douglases. The 16-year-old William Douglas, 6th Earl of Douglas, and his younger brother David were invited to Edinburgh Castle to dine with the young King James II. They were then arrested, accused of treason, subjected to a rapid trial and executed. Their deaths were part of the struggle by rival political factions to reduce the enormous power of the Douglas family. And there's another detail that literally gave me chills. The really famous and horrifying part is the black bull's head. According to later accounts, while the boys were dining, a black bull's head was brought to the table. It was supposedly a symbol that the people sitting at the table had been condemned to death. The Douglas brothers were later beheaded. So how is it related to the Red Wedding? I'm just gonna compare them very quickly. In the Black Dinner, you have a powerful young nobleman invited to a seemingly friendly gathering. Hospitality is used as a trap. Political rivals have secretly decided to eliminate him. The guests are betrayed and murdered. The event helps reshape the balance of power. In the Red Wedding, if you remember, Robb Stark and his followers attend the Frey's wedding. If you remember, there was his mom, his wife, and their unborn baby. Hospitality is used as a trap. Walder Frey, who's a horrible character, and his allies have secretly decided to eliminate Robb. Robb, Catelyn, and many of their followers are murdered. The massacre radically changes the political balance of Westeros. Like I said, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear my cat. As I said, George R.R. Martin is very passionate about history. He is a student of history. So yeah, he did a lot of research while writing A Game of Thrones. And an interesting thing that stuck with me that he said, it's not a quote by him, but it's something that he paraphrased. If you steal from one person, then it's plagiarism. But if you steal from many, then it's research. He also talked about, of course, Tolkien, not only history, but Tolkien. Tolkien was a big inspiration of his, of course, as he is to a lot of writers. But he said that he didn't want to fall into this mistake of recycling Tolkien ideas like a lot of people do. He was inspired by this whole idea of creating your own universe, creating a story with hundreds of characters, detailed settings. He wanted to create a story with dragons, witches, with everything that you can think of. And the interesting thing is that this whole series started with just an image that came to him. And this image was the Stark kids finding a litter of direwolf pups. And then he started gradually building the story. As a matter of fact, this is also another interesting thing that I learned from George R.R. Martin. He categorizes writers in two categories. Writers that he would refer to as gardeners, and he is part of the gardeners. And you have architect writers. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the two. Architect writers, they plan the story before writing it. They create a detailed outline or blueprint of the story. They know major elements in advance, plot points, characters, structure, ending, etc. Like an architect designing a house, they know where everything is supposed to go before construction begins. They generally follow the plan while drafting. This approach gives them more control and predictability over the final story. Changes, of course, they can happen, but the basic structure is established beforehand. So they have the basic points, they just fill the holes. Just like an architect. The architect has to follow the blueprint. You cannot, on the day of construction, say, no, remove this wall or remove this window. It's not as simple as that. However, gardener writers, and just like George R.R. Martin, and I think Stephen King is the same, and who else? I think Stephen King, J.K. Rowling as well. So they start with a seed of an idea, perhaps a character, a situation, a setting, a premise. They begin writing without knowing exactly what the story will become. The story develops organically as they write. They may know what kind of seed they've planted, but they don't necessarily know how big it will grow or what shape it will take. Characters can surprise the writer and cause the story to change direction. Literally, sometimes they don't even know what's going to happen to their characters. Ideas just pop all of a sudden. They get an idea and then it starts developing by itself. The writer discovers the story while writing it rather than simply executing a predetermined plan. This can produce unexpected developments because the author is discovering the things along with the reader. In simple terms, I start the story and I find out what it becomes. George R.R. Martin said that let's say you decide to plant tomatoes. You know what you're going to plant. You know that you're going to have tomatoes. However, you don't know what color they're going to turn out to be. You don't know the taste. You don't know the shape. There's a video where I talk about Stephen King, and Stephen King is the same. Stephen King hates planning. He thinks that you kill the joy of the creative process if you plan ahead of time what you're going to write about. What else? I think that's it. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about. By the way, I didn't prepare for this video. It was very spontaneous. I usually have my slides. I usually know about everything that I want to talk about. This time it was more spontaneous. I just wrote down a few bullet points that I didn't want to forget about. So yeah, I do recommend this book. If you are a fan of Game of Thrones and if you're thinking about reading them, I do recommend them. They're very lovely to read. They're cozy, especially if you have the show in your head. It's not going to be difficult, trust me. In case you're wondering, this book covers season 1, where Eddard Stark is beheaded. It ends with the scene where Daenerys walks through the fire, then her petrified eggs hatch, and we see her 3 baby dragons, and they're so adorable. And I love how the last word in this book is dragon. I am excited to read the rest, because again, there are specific things that I want to learn more about, especially the training that Arya goes through with the Faceless Man. This religion cult thingy, I don't know, but they refer to them once in this book, and they talk about them in terms of this very elite group of assassins. They're very expensive. If you want to pay them to do the job for you, and you know what I mean by job, they're very expensive. So I'm very interested to learn more about that, because I was so in love with this whole phase of Arya training with the Faceless Man, how she learned to disguise herself, lie convincingly, observe people, move unnoticed, use different identities, and killing without being detected. It's so cool. So that's that. I told you I want to update you on my other reads, and to keep track of both, I'm keeping 2 separate documents with notes about both, because I don't want to forget about what I have read so far. Now, I'm not going to say anything, because these 2 books deserve a video for themselves, because Japanese literature is very important to me. This book was a gift from a very dear friend of mine. I am halfway through it. I think I can literally finish it in one sitting. If I were to read it today, and I can finish it tonight. So far, so beautiful. It's Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. And if you watched the Murakami video that I did, in the video I said that I am looking forward to read 1Q84 because I was so curious about it. I did finish book 1 and 2, which was a huge book. No, I shouldn't say anything now. I mean, it goes without saying, it's Murakami and I love Murakami. I loved it. I loved reading it. And I reached book 3. So book 1 and 2 were in one book, and then I ordered book 3. I struggled to find it actually. I couldn't find it on Amazon, I couldn't find it anywhere, but then I luckily found it on Desert Guard. I'm excited to finish it because there's a lot of suspenseful stuff happening. And that's it from me. Oh, I forgot a quote. No, we always have to end it with a quote. Game of Thrones has a lot of beautiful quotes, but the one that I chose for today is the following. It was a scene between Maester Aemon and Jon Snow. Again, context, as you know, people who take the black or people who take the vow to be part of the wall and be part of the Night's Watch, they have a very tough life because they have to give up on a lot of things. They have to give up on their families. They cannot leave the wall or else they will be executed. They cannot make love to a woman. They cannot father a child. Nothing. The wall is kind of an equivalent to prison. They send a lot of criminals there where they can serve the realm. It's kind of a punishment, but at the same time they're giving something good. So Jon was very torn about leaving because he knew that his family was in trouble. He wanted to fight a war with his brother. He wanted to save his father, but at the same time he had taken a vow. He cannot just leave. I mean, they had to hold him down many times and tell him, you have to choose. You either leave or you take the vow and you stay. So the final speech about this matter was given by Maester Aemon. He tells him, what is honor compared to a woman's love? What is duty against the feel of a newborn son in your arms, or the memory of a brother's smile? Wind and words, we are only human, and the gods have fashioned us for love. That is our great glory and our great tragedy. So sad and beautiful. If you watched this video all the way through, I want to say thank you so much, and I will see you again soon, hopefully. And also, let's hope that the audio worked this time, or else I'm not gonna do this again. They say third time is a charm. We'll see.